Thank you for supporting Maine's land.
Thank you for supporting clean energy.
Thank you for supporting safe elections.
Thank you for supporting climate action.
Thank you for supporting racial justice.
Thank you for supporting clean air.
Thank you for supporting our kids' future.
Thank you for supporting an equitable future.
Thank you for supporting strong democracy.
Thank you for supporting clean water.
Thank you for supporting Maine's climate future.
Thank you for supporting Maine Conservation Alliance and Maine Conservation Voters.
Hi everyone, it's Greta from Maine Conservation Voters, Maine Conservation Alliance. We are so excited that you're going to be joining us this year for the virtual Evening for the Environment. Since we're going remote, we have a new way to stay in touch throughout the evening. We're going to be using a platform called Slido, which is a super fun and simple way that you can engage with us during the event. So in this short little video, I'm going to show you how to access our Slido account so that you can participate during the evening as well. Let's go take a look. So the first thing we're going to do is grab our smartphone, or you can use your laptop too. Step 1 is to open up the browser of your choosing, such as Safari or Google Chrome. Step 2, navigate to the address slido.com, slido.com. Step 3, in the field that appears on the web page, enter the code evenings. And that's it. You can enter the code by pressing the green arrow, and it will take you to the event page where we'll prompt some fun questions and polls during the event. So to recap, navigate to slido.com, enter the code evening, and there you'll be prompted with real-time questions during this year's virtual Evening for the Environment. We've got a really fun lineup this year for the Evening for the Environment, and we're thrilled that you'll be there to celebrate with us. See you then!
Thank you for supporting Maine's land.
Thank you for supporting clean energy.
Thank you for supporting safe elections.
Thank you for supporting climate action.
Thank you for supporting racial justice.
Thank you for supporting clean air.
Thank you for supporting our kids' future.
Thank you for supporting an equitable future.
Thank you for supporting strong democracy.
Thank you for supporting clean water.
Thank you for supporting Maine's climate future.
Thank you for supporting Maine Conservation Alliance and Maine Conservation Voters.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Maureen Druin, Executive Director of Maine Conservation Voters and Maine Conservation Alliance. I am joined by MCV's fabulous board president, Adam Lee, and together we extend a heartfelt welcome to you. Now, Adam and I are wearing masks, face masks, as we stand here together, but for the rest of the evening, we'll be at a safe distance of at least 6 feet apart. For those of you who would like to participate in the interactive portion of our event, pick up your smartphone and go to slido.com, SLIDO.com, and enter the code EVENING. We've got our first question of the night here. Where are you tuning in from today? Let us know by going to slido.com, SLIDO.com, on your smartphone and enter the code EVENING. Tonight we come to you remotely for this year's virtual Evening for the Environment, and I would like to begin our program by acknowledging that we are on the traditional lands of the Wabanaki Confederacy. We thank the tribes in Maine for their long stewardship, and we support their effort in securing their sovereignty. We also want to take a moment to recognize the passing of a giant, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was a blessing to this country, and we recognize the legacy she left behind for all of us on gender equality, on environmental protection, on voting rights, and on so much more. Justice Ginsburg will continue to be a bright light, guiding us even in the most challenging times.
It's a pleasure to be here tonight to celebrate our wonderful state together. We have an amazing lineup of speakers that we're eager to share with you. And just a note that our speaker videos were recorded before the passing of Justice Ginsburg. I'd like to start by giving thanks to our premier, champion, and patron-level sponsors, Bangor Savings Bank, Elliottsville Plantation, the National League of Conservation Voters, Lee Auto Malls, LL Bean, and Verrill. And thank you to all business, foundation, and organizational sponsors, as well as our host committee, for helping take us remote this year. In these extraordinary and challenging times, your support means even more than ever. And wow, take a look at that word cloud. We've got people tuning in from all over the state, even Texas.
You know, these are extraordinary times we're living through right now. America is facing a health crisis, a racial justice crisis, and a climate crisis. We are at a crossroads, and the choices we make now to address these interconnected issues will be felt for generations to come. Our speakers tonight will touch on these themes.
We are so fortunate to live here in Maine. This pandemic has shifted our collective relationship with nature and forced us to slow down, get outside, and prioritize what really matters. How lucky we are to have a strong leadership in Governor Janet Mills and Maine CDC Director Dr. Nirav Shah. And how lucky we are to be able to step outside and be greeted by Maine's natural beauty. Let's celebrate tonight. Let's raise a glass to the good things in our great state together. First up this evening, Governor Janet Mills shares a special address with you all and offers wisdom from one of America's beloved poets. Let's take a look.
In August, I stood lakeside, on a clear night, head upward, studying the Perseid meteor shower, you know, the ancient debris of starry cadavers that dusted the dark sky. I thought of the poem by Walt Whitman, an interesting one. Quote, "When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were arranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I, sitting, heard the astronomer where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon, unaccountable, I became tired and sick, till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the mystical moist night air, and from time to time looked up in perfect silence at the stars." The events of this year, indeed the past several years, have rocked our world. While the COVID-19 pandemic has consumed the public's attention, and as we put the full force of our will and our wallets behind preserving the economy, opening schools, preventing deaths, other public health crises still loom large, unabated, including climate change. Last year at this time, I had spoken to the General Assembly of the United Nations, telling them Maine won't wait to address climate change. I had traveled to Iceland to speak to the Arctic Circle Assembly, telling them how Maine had joined the U.S. Climate Alliance to pursue the goals of the Paris Accords, and how we had invested in electric vehicles and heat pumps, solar power, sustainable forestry, and conservation. How we had withdrawn from the Outer Continental Shelf Coalition that promoted drilling off our shores for gas and oil. How we had enacted some of the most ambitious renewable energy goals in our country. Above all else, I said, Maine state government had committed to accepting science without polemic to mitigate the disastrous effects of greenhouse gas emissions and global climate change on our natural resources, on our economy, on the health and very survival of our citizenry and our planet. Today we call upon science again, this time to prevent the spread of a deadly virus, the one that prevents us from meeting in person and raising a glass together and sharing ideas and observations face to face this very evening. As we study facts and science, though, whether attacking a pandemic or confronting the dangers of rising oceans and climate change, still we look up in wonder at the sky. We take refuge in the woods and waters of our state. We find comfort in navigating the rough waves around our islands. We troll the quiet wood-bordered streams for trout. We are healed by our state's vast natural resources, and we remember the words of Governor Joshua Chamberlain, who proclaimed 150 years ago, quote, "They will love the land, and the land will give back strength." And there we do get our strength. And like Wendell Berry, we remain still and listen to the voices that belong to the stream banks and the trees and the open fields. Find your hope then, Wendell Berry says, on the ground under your feet. Your hope of heaven, let it rest on the ground underfoot. The world is no better than its places. Its places, at last, are no better than the people, while their people continue in them. So it's a pleasure to welcome you as people devoted to the preservation of this place, this planet, and this special place we call Maine, our home. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this evening for the environment. I join you both tonight, both in sympathy and in spirit, and in our natural and mutual respect for science. And after you contemplate the important topics of water quality, land use, air pollution, and astronomy, I invite you to join me and our friend Walt Whitman outside as we look up in perfect silence at the stars. Thank you, friends, for all you do tonight and always. Please keep the faith and stay safe.
Poetry, inspiration, and leadership. Thank you, Governor Mills, for your beautiful reflection and for your leadership during this challenging time, balancing complex priorities and keeping us safe. We've got another Slido question coming up soon. Again, that's slido.com, and we'll take a look at the results after the next speaker. At MCV and MCA, racial equity, justice, and inclusion are foundational principles that we aspire to carry throughout our work. And as Reverend Yearwood likes to say, racial justice is climate justice, and climate justice is racial justice. Here is the Rev.
Hi, I'm Rev Yearwood, president of the Hip Hop Caucus, and I'm so excited to join you on this evening for the environment. And I so appreciate the Maine conservation voters for all the amazing work they do for the great state of Maine. I love Maine. My kids go to college in Maine. And so I appreciate them for ensuring that we have clean air and clean water. This truly is our lunch counter moment for the 21st century. In the 20th century, greats like John Lewis, who caused good trouble, fought for equality. But we are not only fighting for equality, we are now fighting for existence in the 21st century. And we must connect the dots. Racial justice is climate justice, and climate justice is racial justice. Climate change is a civil rights issue. We have a right to clean air. We have a right to clean water. And we must do everything in our power to not only fight for our planet, but for us as well. We must do it. We must stand up. And we must come together. We must break the silos that keep us apart. And we must ensure that we don't have a segregated, siloed, progressive climate movement, but one movement that comes together to fight for climate justice at this critical time. So I thank you so much, because I know that organized people beats organized money every single time. So thank you so much for being true to this critical moment. And thank you for being the activist that fights for future generations. All power to the people.
I love that. Thank you, Rev Yearwood. So, reviewing our poll results, wow, it looks like 93%, can't read it, 93% have become more active in the fight for racial justice and equity this year. At the beginning of the evening, we honored the traditional Wabanaki lands that are now called Maine. Our next speaker will highlight the importance of tribal sovereignty, Ambassador Molly Dana of the Penobscot Nation. Molly.
Hello. My name is Molly Dana, and I serve as the appointed tribal ambassador for the Penobscot Nation. The Penobscot Nation is one of 5 reservation communities in Maine. Together, we are called the Wabanaki Confederacy, the Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, Micmac, and Maliseet. When we think about environmental matters in Maine, I think it has to begin with the tribes. We have been stewards of these lands and waters for thousands and thousands of years, and so much of the preservation and stewardship and care for Mother Earth really comes back to the tribes and our traditional practices and how caring for the earth is woven into everything that we do. It can't be a separate thing to work on. It has to underscore all of our efforts. For the tribes, recently, the biggest component in this fight is tribal sovereignty and having our inherent status as sovereign nations recognized by the state of Maine, the federal government, and local towns and municipalities. When we have jurisdiction and control over our lands and waters, we have so much more ability to do good things and to work with our neighbors and to preserve and keep pristine so much of the beautiful Wabanaki homelands that we now call Maine. A few ways to assist the tribes in these efforts is to support upcoming legislation in probably the next legislative session. we have taken a huge undertaking in amending the 1980 Land Claim Settlement Act, and we have broken it into a few bills that address all the different areas where there have been tension between the tribes and the state of Maine because of this tug of war over sovereignty. The tribes maintain that we never relinquished any sovereign status when we signed the Land Claim Settlement Act. You can also support the newly formed 501c4, the Wabanaki Alliance, and we will keep everybody up to date on the legislative efforts, on who the champions are for lawmakers in the state of Maine, and a lot of those initiatives will parallel tribal issues and environmental issues because, like I said, it is all intertwined for us. So thank you for your support and for listening, and I'm happy to discuss anything further, and best of luck, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ambassador Dana. To learn more about the Wabanaki Alliance and their fight for tribal sovereignty, you can visit wabanakialliance.com. Last year, Maine lost a conservation hero, Hattie Hildreth. Hattie was a Republican state senator who authored some of the most important environmental laws in the state: the Department of Environmental Protection's Site Location Law, the Wetlands Control Law, the Bottle Bill, and the law that created the Maine Land Use Regulation Commission. Hattie helped produce MCV's first environmental scorecard in 1986, against the advice of his father, who was a former governor of Maine. I didn't know Hattie back then, but I knew his reputation as a conservation legend. When I first became executive director of MCA and MCV at the age of 32, I didn't know what to expect, but I was a little intimidated. What I found in Hattie was a kind, humble, smart, and generous man who was always willing to sit down and talk with me about the environment and politics, even when we didn't agree, and long after he left the board. We all miss Hattie terribly and would like to share this tribute to honor his legacy, beginning with Senator Angus King.
I loved Hattie Hildreth. I've known him for almost 40 years. His warmth, his humor, his insight, his capacity for making change, for advocating for change, his passion for the environment. I first met him in 1976 when I was thinking about doing some lobbying because I had just started a law practice in Brunswick and wasn't exactly getting rich, and I did know a bit about politics. And Hattie hired me to be the first full-time lobbyist for the environmental community in Maine. I represented a group that Hattie had created called CRAC, Coastal Resources Action Committee. And working with Hattie during that period on almost a daily basis on all the legislation that was then perking along in the Maine legislature, the Bottle Bill, the Billboard Bill, subdivision laws, you name it. We worked on it and were definitely closely engaged. And I've stayed close to Hattie over the years, visited with him out on Vinyl Haven and at the business in Portland. I just can't say enough good about the guy. I miss him. Saw him in Portland just before we lost him. He just means so much to me, meant so much to me and to Maine. He was a state senator, but most of his real contributions were made not by being in office, but by influencing those in office, and it was always for the good. So the conservation voters, you picked a great hero. Hattie Hildreth is definitely one of my heroes and somebody whose impact and effect on Maine is indelible and it will last for generations. Congratulations for your evening. Thanks to Wooly and the Hildreth family. And Hattie, we miss you, man. And we're going to try to keep doing the work that you set us all out to do. Thanks for what you did for Maine and for what all of those who are together this evening are doing for Maine.
I grew up with Uncle Hattie in my life, but it wasn't until I was in my 30s as an adult that I understood the impact that he had in Maine and as a leader, and he never talked about it. In all of those family gatherings, he was focused on family and he wasn't focused on himself. And he never felt the need to boast about his accomplishments. And I think that speaks to him as a person in that he was never that comfortable with the spotlight on him. He always would want to talk about other people's accomplishments, where really he was such a hero in Maine. And what he did for Maine and the environmental movement, he set the foundation for the environmental movement in the next 50 years after those years in the 60s and 70s.
A wonderful man first, warm-hearted, generous, but also he loved a good fight, and he felt strongly that conservation values were shared all across Maine, and that it was not a partisan issue. But when it was time to fight, he would roll up his sleeves and have at it. And a good example is when LePage was elected, and his first bill, LD1, would have eviscerated all of the landmark environmental laws that Hadi and his colleague Harry Richardson drafted. Hadi really led the fight, testifying before the Environment and Natural Resources Committee at the legislature in a very hostile environment. And through his leadership and that of a lot of other good supporters of the environment and conservationists, LD1 went down to defeat.
I remember him being a very engaged board member. And one of the memories I have is that we entered into a strategic planning process when the consultant asked us, what's the lay of the land? What's the background against which we are making plans? And the very first remark came from Hadi, who said, income inequality. Now here was a person who, by anyone's measure, had privilege, who was willing to address that issue. He was wonderful. He was engaged, he was generous. He was also had expectations and hopes for the environmental community to become more effective, as he had expectations and hopes for our elected leaders to do the right thing by our environment.
There are a lot of things that were really special about Hadi. He led by example as a landowner, as a donor. He used his privilege for really public good. He was very affable. He was very spirited at Maine Conservation Voters Board meetings. We'd have very passionate, full conversations. One of the values that Hadi and I had in common is that we believe that protecting the environment isn't expensive, it's priceless.
Hadi was instrumental in building Maine's environmental movement and Maine conservation voters, and will continue to carry on in his legacy. Thank you, Hadi. I now want to take a moment to thank two of our Maine Conservation Voters board members who are retiring this year, Jen Burns-Gray and Roger Burley. Both served as president of MCV's board. They've been exceptional team members, and they are dedicated to our shared cause. Thank you both. And now, let's turn to a familiar voice for many of us who in recent months, and someone who's been a guiding light in the darkness of this pandemic. Maine CDC Director Dr. Nirav Shah, who is also a member of Maine's Climate Council.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nirav Shah. I'm the director of the Maine Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Thank you so very much for the invitation to join all of you this evening. Even as we grapple with COVID-19 as a state, as a country, and as a planet, we must not lose sight of other pressing threats to the public health. The most notable among those is the threat posed by climate change. Even though so many of us right now are focused on the immediate concerns that COVID-19 raises, climate change and the concerns that it raises for our planet, for our society, and for our health have not gone away. I'd like to take a moment to chat about two aspects at the intersection between COVID-19 and climate change. The first is a concern that viruses such as the virus that causes COVID-19 could be all too common in the near future. This has many reasons associated with it. One is the concern that as climates warm across the globe, species that were previously relegated to colder parts of the environment may move or experience warmer climates, putting them in closer proximity to humans, thus raising possibilities of infectious diseases. The other concern that is specific to COVID-19 has to do with increasing urbanization and the fact that humans and animals are living closer to one another than they have in perhaps any time in human history. As animal density as well as human density continue to increase, and those two groups find themselves closer and closer together, the possibility that viruses can jump from animal species to human species grows greater and greater. Given that humans do not have the innate immune response to many of these novel viruses, the possibility that pandemics like COVID-19 could recur with more frequency in the future is one that we must not ignore. The other aspect, on a more optimistic note, with respect to COVID-19 and concerns about the climate and the environment, concern how we approach big problems that are facing us. I have to be honest with you. If you had asked me 8 months ago whether as a country or as a state we would be able to mobilize in the way that we have, using science as our North Star, to craft a wide-ranging response to a coming threat such as COVID-19, and then continue to adapt to that threat after it arrived, as we have done so, I would have been skeptical. Now, to be clear, the response to COVID-19 across the country has been uneven. I'm incredibly proud of the work that people in Maine have done. They have, when asked by officials to follow the best available science, have been guided to those best available mechanisms and have followed suit in ways that have led to Maine being in a favorable position with respect to COVID-19. Things like engaging in physical distancing and wearing face coverings when they're out in public have contributed to the relatively low rates of COVID-19 that we see right now. One of the things to which I attribute that to is the fact that in Maine, science matters. I think the lessons that we've learned from the ways in which people have changed their behaviors in response to COVID-19 are instructive for the ways that individuals can do the same thing when it comes to climate change. Simply put, when there are concerning things on the horizon, people in Maine can activate and mobilize in such a fashion to tackle those problems. Don't ever let anyone tell you that difficult things can't be done. The experience with COVID-19 in Maine has demonstrated that when there are challenges on the horizon, whether they be from an infectious disease or whether they be from the threat of climate change, people in Maine can get the job done. There are reasons to be optimistic about climate change. Number one among them is the commitment of people in Maine to making our planet a safer and healthier place. So I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. I continue to commend you for the work that each and every one of you is doing. We have a long road ahead of us. Let's keep it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shah, for your leadership. Up next is another important voice in the fight for climate justice, and one who's made it her mission to push for a brighter future for the next generation. Let's hear from youth activist Siri Pierce from Portland. And stay tuned for another poll question on Slido. And after Siri, we have a special musical guest from the band Guster.
My name is Siri Pierce. I'm the Youth Director of Solarize Portland. I first want to thank Maine Conservation voters for giving me the opportunity to share my story here tonight. So Solarize Portland formed about 2 years ago. We're a collaboration of students and teachers from across Portland advocating for solar arrays on our schools. In May of 2019, we organized a rally with over 300 students and adult allies who came out in support of our vision. We also raised over $25,000 through crowdfunding and individual and business donations. Our hard work paid off when this past February, the school, district, and city signed into a solar consortium, which through a series of remote solar projects will produce 20 million kilowatt hours and offset 2/3 of our combined city and school district electrical load. So after the success of our campaign, I became inspired to continue to research the potential of solar in schools and organize a summit for other students and teachers interested in launching solar campaigns at their schools. However, unfortunately, as a result of the pandemic, I was forced to cancel the event. But afterwards, Maine Conservation voters reached out to me and asked how they could help. And they offered a lot of support in the planning of a virtual summit. I did not have a lot of experience organizing virtual events, so they provided that expertise and helped me promote the event among their networks. And ultimately, the event was really successful. We had over 70 attendees, many of whom were students and teachers who were excited about the possibility of launching solar campaigns at their schools. And I think this is an example of how adult established organizations can support youth initiatives. I had a vision and a dream of how I could give other students the tools and resources they needed to turn their idea of solar schools into a reality. However, I needed the technical assistance and experience of an established organization like Maine Conservation Voters. And I think especially at this moment in time, it's very important to elevate youth voices and youth initiatives. And I think Maine Conservation Voters modeled how this can and should be done. Because ultimately, youth can and should play a role in the design and engineering of a more just and sustainable world, because it is our future and we have the power to shape it as we like, as long as we are equipped with the resources and information we need.
Thank you, Siri, for inviting us to partner with you. I'm sure that you'll be pleased to hear that just yesterday, the Maine Public Utilities Commission approved contracts for 17 renewable power projects, most of them solar. Looking at our poll results, it seems that hiking, gardening, and paddling are about the top of the list. And now, everyone, a special performance from co-founder of Reverb and Augusta band member, Adam Gardner.
Hi everyone, I'm Adam from the band Guster. I also co-founded with my wife, Lauren Sullivan, the environmental nonprofit group Reverb here in Maine. We work with a bunch of musicians all around the country and their fans to engage them to take action for people on the planet, both at concerts and online. We've had the honor of working with MCV at Thompson's Point, where we have a program there, and we just love the work they're doing here in our lovely state of Maine, protecting all that we have here and everywhere. They asked me to play a song. Stacy said to play something upbeat. I don't normally play by myself. All our band members are in different states, so I'll do my best. I've got a little gadget here that will help me, I hope. Let's see what happens, so I can basically play along with myself. Maybe. Here we go.
Shining like a work of art, hanging Passenger sign, light in the sky, always the first star that I find. You're my satellite.
It's normally the keyboard part that plays this thing, but
elevator to the moon, whistle in our favorite tune, trying to get a closer view. You're my satellite. Light in the sky, always the first star that I find. You're my satellite. Maybe you will just a little out of reach. You're my satellite. You're riding with me tonight. Passenger side, light in the sky, always the first star that I find.
thanks, MCV. Let's all get out there and vote and make the change we all need to happen. Have a good evening.
That was so great. Thank you to Adam, his wife Lauren, and the team at Reverb for inspiring millions of music lovers and music makers in tackling today's most pressing environmental and social issues. As we all know, it's an election year, and everything from climate change to the future of our democracy is at stake. Voting is the language of American democracy, and no one should have to choose between voting and protecting their health. The pandemic has added a layer of complexity to voting this year, which means that we have to work twice as hard to ensure that our elections are free, fair, safe, and accessible to all eligible voters. Our next two speakers will address these subjects. First up is Justin Kawasa, the League of Conservation Voters Voting Rights Director, followed by Lewiston City Councilor Sophia Khalid. And keep an eye out for the next poll question.
Hello, my name is Justin Kawasa, and I'm the Voting Rights Program Director at League of Conservation Voters. I got into voting rights because I was raised by my grandmother, who was born in the Jim Crow South in Mississippi. At 18, she left to go to Chicago in order to make a better life for herself and her family. You see, she lived in a country where she understood that liberty and justice for all were promised in our Constitution, but not always guaranteed for all of our communities. In August, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment that gave women the rights to vote, and the 55th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act that protected minority communities' rights to vote. Two pieces of legislation that brought us closer to that American ideal, but still didn't do the full job. Today, we still have bad actors that are aimed at limiting voters in order to protect their very narrow interests. And this lack of the polls has the greatest effect locally, where the races are the closest and are only determined by a couple of votes sometimes. We're talking about the city council races and the zoning boards that directly affect how our air, land, and water are used. This lack of access to the polls, and in turn, this lack of access to our democracy, sets the table for the environmental injustices that we're fighting for not only here in Maine, but across the country. That is why it's so important for organizations like Maine Conservation Voters to advocate for safe and secure ways for communities to vote. That means increasing vote by mail options so that people, particularly in this pandemic, can vote from the comfort of their homes. That means increasing early voting hours and locations so that Election Day isn't the only day that people can cast a vote in person. That means preventing poll consolidations and making them more accessible so that when people do go and vote, they can actually use the systems there. And that means changing our registration system in order to make sure that people are automatically registered to do their civic duty. Look, we know that when our elected officials are truly representative of the communities that they're elected to represent, they will pass the legislation in order to protect their people. We cannot have a healthy environment without first having a healthy democracy. And a healthy democracy starts with every community having access to the ballot.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophia Khalid. I am from Lewiston, Maine, and I work with Gateway Community Services in Maine. I wanted to quickly let you all know why environmental justice and climate change is important to me. So several areas that I really wanted to bring to light is that low-income communities are disproportionately more affected when it comes to environmental and climate change, especially in our own communities, where a lot of communities live in areas where manufacturing and facilities do like hazardous chemical products. The other thing is that we all need to be brought to the forefront when it comes to environmental justice because of the high levels of racial health disparities and all the inequities all around. And the third thing is that from immigration to housing, where there's a lot of lead contamination, to transportation, and to our own communities being safer and much more healthier, we all need to be brought to the decision-making table, and so that we can be more equitable in the policies and the decisions that are made. The other thing I really wanted to touch upon, which is very important, especially in this difficult time for everyone, is the upcoming election of 2020. I really want to emphasize that whatever we can do, we all need to be involved, from registering people to vote to the importance of absentee ballot, to relational organizing, to sharing information on social media, whatever it is. It's all hands on deck, and we all need to be involved and be included, however that looks like. That being said, thank you so much for having me, and I hope that we open more doors for more people to come on and really talk about what environmental justice means to them, especially people of color. Have a wonderful day.
Voting rights and voting safely in this year's general election are certainly top of mind. It looks like 85% of our poll respondents are planning to vote by absentee ballot. If you haven't already requested your ballot yet, it's not too late, but don't wait another day. And if you're unsure whether you'll vote at all in the general election, let's hear from Joel Clement of Wayne, Maine, on why voting is an important part of climate action. After being silenced and reassigned at the Department of Interior in 2017, Joel became a courageous whistleblower and stood up for science.
From Wayne, Maine, my name is Joel Clement. You're a friendly neighborhood climate whistleblower, here to talk to you about what it's like in the federal government right now, what's been happening in the Trump administration, and why we need to make sure to vote in November. I was a career executive at the Interior Department when the Trump administration came in. I was working on climate change adaptation and helping Alaska Native villages address some pretty severe climate impacts up there as the permafrost was thawing, sea ice was melting, and these big storms were coming in, threatening to wipe villages right off the map. And what I found was that the political leadership of the Trump administration came in without any intention at all of helping people, without any intention at all of addressing climate change, with no interest in climate action at all. And when it became clear that they were going to ignore this even when Americans were at risk, I blew the whistle. I resigned a few months later when it became clear that not only did they not care, they were misusing American taxpayer dollars, and they were leading people astray. They appeared intent on breaking the agency, not fulfilling the mission of the agency. That's the kind of thing that you need to step up and speak out about. Since then, there have been lots of other whistleblowers, mostly in the national security area, but others like Dr. Maria Caffrey and others at Interior who have stepped up and said, hey, we've got a job to do at Interior. We've got a job to do at every agency. It's not appropriate for political interference in science. It's not appropriate to take personnel actions that compromise people's ability to get the job done just for political reasons. They were doing all of it. They were just reading from a playbook that violated every personnel management guideline in government. And of course, that's still going on. And not only are they neglecting climate change, but they're rolling back all the rules and laws that were put in place to protect us Americans, to protect the Maine economy, the Maine people, and the Maine environment from the impacts of climate change. So we're right in the middle of it here in Maine. We suffer from climate impacts. We'll be suffering more. We need an active and engaged federal government to provide guidance, to provide resources and motivation to do the job. Right? We've got a great governor, and the governor's office is going great guns to try to address climate justice and climate action right now. But it should not just fall to the states for that. The feds need to be deeply involved. And we're going to need to make some changes in November in order to make sure that happens, so that whistleblowers like me didn't do this in vain, because it's a sacrifice. It's something you got to do, but it's still a sacrifice, and you hope something's going to come of it. So I deeply hope that in November, everybody votes, and we get some important new momentum for climate action.
Thank you, Joel, for speaking up and for putting yourself on the line for us. While tackling climate change can sometimes seem overwhelming, I am happy to report that Maine is leading the way to reduce our carbon pollution and advance climate-centered innovation. Next up are two powerhouse Maine leaders who have been at the forefront of protecting Maine's environment and building Maine's clean energy economy. Maine's Speaker of the House, Sarah Gideon, and Maine's 1st Congressional District Representative, Shelley Pingree.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this special celebration. I'm Sarah Gideon, the Speaker of the Maine House, and while I wish we were all together in person, I am so pleased to be a part of this year's Evening for the Environment, and I'm thrilled to celebrate the work of Maine conservation voters. As you perhaps know, as a result of term limits, this session will be my last as state representative and as the Speaker of the House. It's a bittersweet moment. It's been the privilege of my life to serve in the Maine State Legislature. But when I look back and reflect upon the past 8 years, it truly is incredible just how far we've come together in our fight against climate change. When I think back to my first session and my time on the Energy, Utilities, and Technology Committee, I don't think I could have imagined the incredible progress we've made. I distinctly remember the feeling when my solar bill fell 2 votes short of an override in 2016. It could have been a moment to give up, but if anything, it inspired MCV and so many others to continue the work and keep advocating for our clean energy future. And that work has paid off. We can see it with the millions of dollars of investments in renewable energy in the state now. And in fact, it seems like every day there's a new project being announced. The work we did together set the table for these accomplishments. In partnership now with Governor Mills, we've taken major steps to combat climate change and its devastating effects, setting goals to drastically decrease our carbon emissions and increase our use of renewable energy. We passed legislation to increase Maine's renewable portfolio standard to 80% by the year 2030, one of the most aggressive standards in the nation. And we set a goal of 100% renewable energy by 2050. We launched an initiative to install 100,000 new heat pumps by 2025, and we established mandates to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while creating the bipartisan Maine Climate Council. These new laws come with others that will help us all limit pollution on our land and in our waters. I'm proud to share that once again, Maine is a leader in our shared fight against climate change. Now, we've all pivoted during this time, and MCV is no different. In fact, I just watched a video of Beth explaining the legislative scorecard via YouTube. But what hasn't changed is your commitment to our environment and ensuring that environmental issues are front and center. I cannot overstate how important this work is to our future. Thank you to Maureen and Beth and Rainey and Kathleen and the rest of the team at MCV. Your work is so incredibly impactful and so valuable. Please stay well, take care of yourselves, and have a great night.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Shelley Pingree. Thank you for hosting this evening for the environment. Our state has a long history of environmental stewardship because our environment takes care of us. We depend on it for our economy, our health, and our general way of life. As we all know well, Maine is already grappling with the widespread effects of climate change. Sea levels are rising. Weather patterns are unpredictable. Our ocean is acidifying. The Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of any other body of water on the planet. The health and well-being of the future generations of our state are on the line. The Gulf of Maine is an irreplaceable natural resource that is critical to the Maine economy and a draw for millions of visitors. It should not be exploited for drilling oil, and that's why I've led efforts in the House that would protect the Gulf of Maine from dangerous actions by the Trump administration. The Gulf of Maine should not be sold to the highest bidder. I believe it is our duty as elected leaders to leave this nation better than how we found it. That means we need to take this climate crisis as seriously as any fight we've ever waged. Like you, I know how important this battle is. From supporting renewable energy and the green jobs that come with it, to protecting the natural resources that play such an important role in sequestering excess carbon in the atmosphere, from our vast forests to our farmland. I've been proud to work on a variety of legislation related to climate change, and I am anxious to move forward on these important policies. For Mainers, these are issues that extend beyond party. When polled, a majority of Mainers said that climate change is already harming the state, and that lawmakers must work across party lines to address the climate crisis. Last summer, the House passed my legislation, the Coastal Communities Ocean Acidification Act. This bipartisan legislation supports coastal communities grappling with climate change-related ocean acidification. Ocean experts would work with the state and local experts to study ocean acidification and inform the public on its impacts. The bill passed the House unanimously, showing that it's not controversial to study the changes in our oceans. Thanks to you all for being great champions of the environment and for being on the front lines of the climate change battle. It's an honor to work with all of you and to speak to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Gideon and Congresswoman Pingree. Stay tuned for our final speakers, Commissioner Judy Camuso and Gina McCarthy. But first, I'm pleased to share with you a musical performance by four-time winner of the Maine's Best Act Award, Pete Kilpatrick.
Hey, this is Pete Kilpatrick. I'm so fortunate to be part of this wonderful event put on by Maine conservation voters. I'm a pretty avid outdoorsman, whether it's mountain biking, kayaking, or fishing. It's so nice to know as a Mainer that there's an organization like MCV that is working on behalf of what I consider our most important asset here in Maine, our environment and the natural resources we have. So I'm going to play you a song called Just Be. This is a brand new song, a song that I wrote when everything kind of shut down in mid-March. So it's a very hopeful song, and hope you enjoy it, and hope you have a wonderful night. Thank you.
I held it all inside for way too long. Now I'm splitting at the seams. There's a battle waging on inside of me. We walk through winding woods in search of peace. Well, it's growing hard to find on days like these. Who's gonna save me if I can't help myself? Who's gonna spin you on the dance floor? Who's gonna turn off all the lights when you're fast asleep? Red-winged blackbird on the power line as I back down Simpson's Point. Well, I had to step away, for fear I lost my mind. Who's gonna fix this if we all run out of tape? Who's gonna glue it back together? I could've never dreamt this up when I was young back in Michigan, just staying for the summer. So don't lose your light. This is temporary. Dry your sad eyes. Be strong, be brave, be here, be safe. Just be, just be. Who's gonna save me if I can't help myself? Who's gonna spin you on the dance floor? Who's gonna turn off all the lights when you're fast asleep? So don't lose your light. This is temporary. Dry your sad eyes. Be strong, be brave, be here, be safe. Believe in me. Just be, just be, just be, just be.
All right, thank you very much, and remember to vote.
Thank you, Pete, for sharing your beautiful new song with us. I love it. Yesterday marked the first day of autumn, and you might be spending more time outside, picking apples, harvesting the last of your vegetables, or enjoying the changing color of the leaves. For our final Slido question, which I know several of you already started answering, we'd love to know, what's your favorite outdoor space in Maine? Now, our final two speakers are remarkable people. Commissioner Judy Camuso is as comfortable in a bear den or tagging saw-whet owls as she is speaking in front of the legislature. And Gina McCarthy, former head of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, reminds us that climate action is, at its core, about protecting people and our communities. We are delighted that they are both appearing here tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Judy Camuso, Commissioner of Maine Fish and Wildlife. Thank you for inviting me to be part of the 2020 Evening for the Environment. I miss getting the chance to see and talk with so many of you, as this event is one of my favorites of the year. My hope is that next year our new normal will allow us to enjoy this evening together once again. You're watching this event tonight because you are passionate about Maine's outdoors, and also because of the pandemic. While the restrictions and impacts of this pandemic have been felt by all, it is also revealed that Mainers, nearly all Mainers, share an incredible passion for the outdoors. During times of crisis, people seek comfort, and I know that you, like me, find comfort in the outdoors. Being outside is restorative. It recharges us physically, mentally, and spiritually. And as we have seen during this pandemic, the vast majority of Mainers feel much the same as you and I. Over the past 6 months, we have seen Mainers flock outdoors, and the numbers back that up. As a department, we have seen more people participating in fishing, boating, hunting, wildlife watching, hiking, ATVing, and all kinds of other outdoor activities. Boat ramps, beaches, trailheads, wildlife management areas, state parks are all seeing increased use. We are seeing increases in the number of anglers, turkey hunters, moose hunters, and deer hunters. In every crisis, opportunities arise and leaders emerge. And as leaders in the outdoor community, we have a chance to welcome a new group of outdoor enthusiasts into our midst. A new group that can help us protect, preserve, and enhance Maine's natural resources. We as leaders must eliminate barriers to the outdoors. As a department, we are seeking to provide additional access to the public in places near where people live. We are providing programs to get people outside and to help break down the barriers that stop people from enjoying outdoor activities. We need to communicate and connect with the broader audience and firmly establish their connection to the outdoors. As we've seen during this pandemic, people can and will change their behavior if it is important to them. A new group of users is flocking to the outdoors because it is important to them. We have a tremendous opportunity to expand our participation rates, to capture a new generation and instill a lifetime of conservation values and connect them to the outdoors permanently and in a way that transcends any pandemic. That challenge belongs to all of us. As leaders in the outdoor community, we must not only welcome a new group of people into the Maine outdoors, but to instill in them a passion that we all share so that they too will work to protect and enhance Maine's natural resources for generations to come.
Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be invited back and hang out with you again. I'm especially excited to be with Governor Mills for tonight's virtual event. I want to give her a big shout out for being such a terrific leader, especially the way she's moved forward on climate action. And it's fun being in the midst of a group of activists and leaders fighting for a better future, including Rep. Shelley Pingree. She is another climate champion and does such a terrific job representing Maine and DC. And I want to recognize my dear friend, the incomparable Reverend Yearwood. He is so passionate, so articulate, and such an honorable and kind man who I have worked with and admired for years. Hey, Rev. I only wish we could all be raising a glass together in person and taking in the scenery of your great state. But alas, this Zoom call existence is just not the way life should be, is it? But we deal with it. I can honestly say, as a lifelong New Englander and someone who vacationed in Maine a lot, that I miss every square inch of your magnificent state. And I want to thank all of you at the Maine Conservation Alliance and the Maine Conservation Voters for the incredible, important work you do to protect and preserve this special state. But unlike 2018, when we last spoke, it feels like our nation is truly in crisis. We are facing unimaginable challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic, a long overdue reckoning with systemic racism, and the devastating impacts of climate change hitting close to home all across our country, from wildfires to hurricanes. These multiple crises are hitting low-income and communities of color especially hard on all fronts as a result of long-standing inequity in our country. And this has to change. Now more than ever, we need to come together to create the future we want, one that benefits everyone and leaves no one behind, a future that recognizes the challenge of climate change and builds those challenges into the system of progress. This has to change. Now more than ever, we need to come together to create the future we want, one that benefits everyone and leaves no one behind, one that centers equity and racial justice, that allows everyone to prosper. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is true, and most people know it, that climate change has arrived, and it is time for us to act decisively and boldly. And while the state of our country may feel dark right now and the challenges look daunting, make no mistake, it is not too late to build a better future. Out of this crisis comes enormous opportunity. For all those in Zoom land who are not spring chickens like myself, you can verify that we have won lots of tough battles before. Just think, 50 years ago this year, 20 million people got together for the first Earth Day and said, enough is enough. They stirred a movement that resulted in real and lasting change. And guess what? It's happening again today. Young activists, women leaders, people of color, old dudes like me are demanding the attention of local and global leaders on issues from climate change to racial justice, and the momentum is now on our side. Despite the best efforts of polluters and their friends in power, clean energy is taking off at the local, state, and global levels because of the economic, health, and quality of life benefits that clean energy has to offer. And now is the time to turbocharge it. Why? Because the future of our families depend on it. As a proud grandmother to two beautiful little grandbabies, I refuse to stay on the sidelines. I refuse to give up, and I refused to let them and all those young people down. And I simply won't allow any of you to wallow in disappointment or fear or anger. If we stick together, we can rebuild from this pandemic by investing in a healthier, more sustainable, more just and equitable future. We will say goodbye to dirty fossil fuels once and for all and truly embrace clean energy and all the jobs that come with it. We'll demand that our leaders put people, not polluters, first and leave no community behind. We will defend the natural beauty and special places in Maine and across our great nation for ourselves and the next generation to enjoy. We'll give our children the future they deserve, one that's full of hope and opportunity. And when are we going to do this? Now. Yes, right now. So let's get to work together. Thanks again for having me.
Well, that's our show. We hope you enjoyed hearing from all of our wonderful speakers and performers this evening. We certainly had a great time. Let's take a quick look at the favorite outdoor places of Maine. Looks like Katahdin Woods and Waters is in the lead with Schoodic Point and Casco Bay. Katahdin Woods and Waters, one of my favorites. A huge thank you to Headlight AV for bringing the event to life, as well as our wonderful staff, boards, and event planning committee. A shout out to all of our legislative environmental champions who are retiring this year. Thank you for working to pass the policies that keep us and our environment safe. And lastly, thanks to all of you who tuned in this evening to celebrate with us, for being a part of our community, and for supporting the work of Maine Conservation Voters and Maine Conservation Alliance.
Be well, stay safe, wear a mask, and don't forget to vote.
Cheers.
Cheers.